Welcome to Body Kindness. Learn and grow.
This is a special podcast series where we help anyone just getting started with body kindness.
We're reflecting on how we have evolved since our earliest episodes. I'm Rebecca Scritchfield.
And I'm Bernie Salazar. Let's get ready to spiral up together. I really engaged him, whether he wanted to or not in that moment, in a very serious relationship about how I felt I needed to be treated and what I was looking for in him as my doctor. And I say this, right, because, listeners, not even 3 years ago, I was avoiding going altogether. Like having this type of discussion was not even something that I would have considered that I could have done, because right away, I don't know about you guys, but I defer to this degree and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they must be right. And I leave there feeling more sick. In the past, I've left there feeling more sick than when I had walked in. And that's why I avoided it.
Well, that was Bernie Salazar, and you recognize him as a regular guest and co-host of the Body Kindness podcast. We are coming in with this Learn and Grow episode where we recap Bernie's recent visit to the doctor and hopefully provide some information for you on how you can avoid a weight lecture at the doctor's office through the lens of Bernie's experience. So typically you would see a Learn and Grow episode where we play a tease and another version of the episode and the reflection. Well, when we recorded the reflection and it was basically an hour long, we decided, oh, wait, we're going to keep these separate. There was just too much to get into. So if you've never heard the original Learn and Grow episode, it could be really interesting for you to go back and hear and kind of compare the difference in Bernie. If nothing else, if you're a person who is struggling with finding peace at the doctor's, just seeing what a difference it can make in your life when you set boundaries. We both share tips for healthcare professionals, tips for advocating for yourself, including when you're experiencing weight stigma and what to do. There's lots of helpful links in the show notes here for you. So we really want to help you have a positive experience at the doctor's office as much as we can. Want to give you a heads up and let you know that we did review Bernie's labs at his request. He emailed them to me and he asked me, hey, I have no idea how to interpret these, but I really want to know, I really, care about our relationship. I really want to hear your feedback on them. So just want to let you know about that we do talk about his lab numbers toward the end, and that by all means, anyone at any size at any lab value is good and worthy, and hopefully you'll get a benefit out of the nuance of that conversation, that, the level of fear that still exists in Bernie, despite all the important and positive work that he has done. He's still working on trusting his well-being in fighting that sort of medical fat phobia and weight stigma that's existing. If you have questions for us to answer in a future episode, that's bodykindnessbook.com/question. Also, make sure that you get started with your free Body Kindness online program. That's at bodykindnessbook.com/start. And join us in our Facebook group. We're the Body Kindness Insiders. Thanks and enjoy the show. Hey, Bernie, what's up?
Becca, good stuff. Just visited my doctor. I'm making that a yearly thing, so can't wait to share what's going on there.
Yeah, so as far as I understand it, several years ago when we first started talking about you going to see the doctor, you had kind of taken a pause, I think, right? You were out in California, kind of help recap.
Yeah, so I want to just start by saying I never really loved going to the doctor. I don't know how too many people that do. So I hadn't gone in a while, right? Just avoiding it. But jumping into what we have been discussing about body kindness, I knew that it was time to just get real and look at the numbers and look at the facts. And I had scheduled an appointment and went ahead and went and found it to be rather insightful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, when we first started talking about it several years ago, there was a lot of fear about, am I going to be weighed or am I going to get shamed? All
Well, of
that.
course, we had done so much work to really talk about just what it means to keep yourself well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not just working out or with a doctor. And I was just really scared that I was going to have a very similar experience in the doctor's office that I'd had my whole life. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if our listeners out there know this, but I've been in a bigger body my entire life. So
Mm-hmm.
some of the conversations that have been had in doctors' offices haven't necessarily been ones that, you would include in love letters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of pain around it, and
Not even just pain. I think for me, it's just started so young to where, a doctor's words, like doctors out there, your words really pierce and have the power to heal. But when it comes to people in larger bodies, my personal experience has been more of it piercing.
mm-hmm.
And I think I've always been talked at and told what to do and what was wrong from the moment I walked in, as opposed to even being, in some instances, greeted properly.
Mm-hmm.
And this is by someone who is going to be examining you, right? That's such a personal and intimate thing.
Mm-hmm.
And to already be going into it with these words of just judgment,
Mm-hmm.
isn't fun. It's like literally being with a lover and them starting off by being like, well, I guess this will do.
Right. Settling. And that's unfortunately what the dilemma that a lot of people face, right? Is knowing that you need medical care, but not trusting that you're going to get the kind of medical care that you deserve. And there's so much vulnerability and insecurity. And for some people, it does lead to healthcare avoidance. And that is a study that came out after the original chat that I'll share the link to it so you could see it. But it was something that when the study came out in, I want to say in 2018, I started using that in all my speaking engagements because it essentially showed a model that the higher your body mass index climbed, like there was an association between higher BMIs and experiencing more weight bias in the medical appointment. And there are mechanisms that help some people kind of move along and build resilience through it. So if you're on the lower end of the higher BMI, or if you have, some sort of coping tools that help you deal with it, again, not that you should have to, but where the big pivot point happens is that we see that there's an increase in amount of healthcare stress. And when it's that healthcare stress that can directly lead to healthcare avoidance. So, and what's so interesting about these things is it's totally preventable. And so what I think we hope to do with this podcast is for any person who has been avoiding the doctor or who has stress over seeing the doctor, and that it's the body kindness thing to do to go, right? We hope that through listening through this, you'll get tools, motivation, support, ideas to help yourself practice nurturing body kindness through the whole process, because you have a right to your health and medical information. But also for healthcare providers, hopefully physicians, but anyone who works in a medical practice or who identifies as working in the medical field. Like, even though I'm in private practice, I would identify as working in the medical field because I refer to doctors. I have a sense of control over networking with doctors and referring. And it might be a small amount of control, but it's still an awareness that there is something meaningful that I can do that can help people on their healthcare visits. So hopefully this is something that people will listen to, get some powerful support, and, get the darn care you need while we ask the medical profession to do a better job and change so that people or the patients don't have to do all this labor, because they really shouldn't.
No, that's spot on. And, it always just takes the first step in trying to really understand what that dynamic can look like and can be. And this is really a reflection of that. So I hope our listeners enjoy. So this one's interesting. I want to start off by saying that I didn't plan on going to see the doctor this year. Every year since the initial episode that everyone just heard, I've made it a practice to go at the beginning of the year to just really have a check in with myself. This year, however, because of our new recent arrival, the birth of our little baby boy, I did end up going earlier than expected just for a flu shot. I have since moved, so I needed to go to a new doctor. But in order for me to get a flu shot, I had to get a full workup. Don't ask. It's always complicated, right? So no big deal. I go for a flu shot, end up getting a full workup. But what was interesting about this is, as I shared before, it wasn't the same doctor as the initial visit. And I think because everything happened so fast, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm seeing a doctor right now. I guess this is going to be my doctor. I went in there. I went in there just not playing around, Rebecca. And that's really new for me. Like I literally was like, okay, you guys got me. I needed a flu shot. You're telling me I need a full workup. Let me go ahead and tell you who I am, because I'm not going to let you just funnel me through this really quick. This is how it came about. You happen to have an opening, but you're going to spend some damn time with me. And I made it a point to really communicate to this new doctor who I was, about my history, even though I wasn't feeling any symptoms that day. Because that's the first thing, right? What are you feeling? Do you feel sick? What hurts? Nothing hurts. I need a flu shot, but unfortunately, I have to do all this in order to get it. But let's go ahead and spend some time together. So I told him about my past. I told him about the fact that I had been, up and down in weight over the course of my entire life. I told him about my experience on The Biggest Loser. I told him that I was looking for a doctor who really looked at the person, not just the physical, but took the time to really treat the entire person. I asked if that's who he was. I did all this respectfully, right? And I share this with our listeners because this took over 3 years for me to just be able to go in there, guns blazing. When I say guns blazing, it's not disrespectful, right? Like, I respect doctors. I really admire the work that they've put in to be able to have the title doctor. But at the same time, I'm looking for a partnership when it comes to my care. And I just don't have time in my life and at this age to accept anything less.
Right. You want care that's free from weight bias, And doctors have to do their work. And honestly, what they have to fight is the fact that they even weigh a patient before asking for permission or asking how that would be helpful. They need to get rid of that. They need to get rid of getting paid to track the BMI and give someone a weight lecture. What they really should do is have the conversation first, not put the onus on the patient. Ask simple questions like, about self-care habits. So what do you do to move? How's your sleep?
Yes.
What do you do around food?
Yeah.
Get information that, ask, hey, do you have weight concerns or do you have concerns about,
That's a really
those
good point.
things?
And all those things, Becca, I went in there just because of our conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I just shared because in my past experience, and it could have been me jumping the gun a bit, and I'm going to go ahead and recognize that. But I went ahead
No,
and
you
said,
have to. Well, you have to
that's
assume
just
that
it.
they're biased. You have to assume that they're biased and that they're going to do painful
That's
stuff.
just it, right? So I was okay, and I'm sharing this with the listeners and with you. I was okay being that he was this was a new doctor-patient relationship, and I was curious, and I was okay with it stepping on a scale. I did, however, tell him that wasn't something that I planned on doing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I did let him know, how I was feeling that day, the fact that I had been getting little to no sleep due to this little newborn.
Mm-hmm.
I did share with him what I felt were my successes and areas that I could improve in regards to my physical health over this coming year. I shared with him a goal that I have this year of moving my body in a more intense way because I'm going to be training for a marathon, and how I needed his support and guidance more so than just, hey, you should probably lose weight because you're going to mess your knees up type stuff. So, I really engaged him, whether he wanted to or not in that moment, in a very serious relationship about how I felt I needed to be treated, and what I was looking for in him as my doctor. And I say this, right, because, listeners, not even 3 years ago, I was avoiding going altogether. Like having this type of discussion was not even something that I would have considered that I could have done because right away, I don't know about you guys, but I deferred to this degree and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they must be right. And I leave there feeling more sick. In the past, I've left there feeling more sick than when I had walked in. And that's why I avoided it. So this is huge. And it started with that initial episode, but at the same time, this is something that I'm constantly having to almost kind of pep myself up to do a bit because I know of the bias that exists.
So how did the doctor respond? What did the doctor say?
So he was really cool, right? And what I mean by that is he didn't buy into everything that I was saying. And I'm okay, but I'm okay with that. He did engage with me in a conversation.
What do you mean he didn't buy into everything you were saying? Give me an example.
So for example, I was like, listen, I want to make sure that you understand that I know that I have been and extremely healthy physically at a larger weight. He's like, and he said, listen, I understand that and I believe that and I've seen that. He goes, but in the future, and this is where again I'm working through this. This was the first time I went to him. He said, but if there's a situation where I do feel that the weight you're carrying is having an effect on the particular thing that you're saying is ailing you, I will mention it, and I will also, talk about other things that it can be. He goes, but so long as you understand that I may bring it up from time to time, but he did say it, I will be respectful. That won't be the thing that I automatically go to given this conversation. But I do feel that there may be certain things.
Right. Did he anticipate certain things? Like, did he anticipate certain things?
No. So, I mean, he didn't share them directly. My guess would be in relation to me sharing my goal of doing another marathon. So we didn't get specific as like, hey, if your knees come in hurting, or if your feet hurt, or if you're having extreme back pain once you start training, I'm going to right away, say it's the weight. But I guess what he was saying, what I took away from it, Rebecca, was and this was the tone that was shared. I hear you. I get it. I'm also working through some of my biases because I could tell that he was processing some of those things as I was sharing with him, not just how I expected to be treated, but also a lot of the research that was out there, just in case he needed that aspect of it. But you could tell he was kind of working through it and just wanted to make sure that in this space where I was sharing what I needed, he was also sharing as a doctor what he wants to. He doesn't, in other words, he says he has had patients that just completely deny the fact that the weight that they're carrying, it could potentially be contributing to an ailment. And he says that's very hard for him as a doctor, that even after he explores other things, that's still off the table for him to bring up. So he was just asking me if that was something that.
Well, okay. So back it up to did he have and review previous lab reports when you guys were engaged in this conversation, or recent labs, or he's basing this response based off of what you're bringing into the room?
Pretty much. It was based off what I was bringing to the room. There was, because it was so quick, there was no access to anything.
Right.
And
so when you told him about The Biggest Loser and weight cycling, did he say anything at all about I'm assuming you talked about over exercise and restricting food. Did he say at all that those were bad and not self-care behaviors and that your weight was too low? Did he acknowledge your weight was too low?
No, we didn't really have the weight conversation. What he did acknowledge was that wasn't a realistic lifestyle that was maintainable, that type of intensity. Before we had any conversations, and again, this was just so you know, it was longer than he had planned it to be. We were about 45 minutes, and pretty sure he had planned
5 minutes.
or 5. Yeah, we had 20, right? And 19 of those are waiting. So what he did end up saying was, let's draw your labs and see where you're at. And
Okay.
that's what left off. So no, he didn't have access to other things. I think that we were literally just kind of setting the groundwork for who
Yeah.
we were, because I did flat out ask him, is this you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he responded,
Yes. Yeah.
hey, this is something I'm trying to work through. I
Mm-hmm.
just want to know that you're okay with me talking about it to a certain extent, not like blaming, but just bringing it up in general. Because he said, I have had patients in the past that just
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
refuse to talk about how potentially something like that
Right.
could be
And
there.
so you know what I want to say about that, Bernie?
Well,
They have every right to flat out refuse. They have every right to flat out refuse. What if that person had an eating disorder, either history of or present, right? What if even talking about weight was triggering? Those patients have every right to say, no, don't ever bring it up. And if you can't do it, I'm finding somebody else. And that's fine. You have every right to decide what you want to do. But understand with this dynamic and the history that you've already had with doctors, even if that doctor is open to doing the work, the doctor is still in the coat. He's still being in this authoritative role. He doesn't even know you, and he's comparing you to other patients. And he's like, hey, so I understand that you have these like weight boundaries and stuff, but like if hypothetically one day down the road you come in with something and I think there is a correlation with your weight, are you telling me I shouldn't say anything? And he's saying, I will bring up your weight. He is saying that he will bring it up, right?
mm-hmm.
How did you tell him how many marathons that you have run previously and your running history?
Yeah. So he
Okay.
knew that.
Yeah.
I did share that with him.
Maybe I'm just being grouchy.
No. Here's the thing, right?
No. Wait,
Like,
I want to tell you what I'm being grouchy about first. Maybe I'm being grouchy, but I don't even think he believes that you are going to train for another marathon. I think he has the potential to be that biased. That's why I asked, okay, did you tell him that you've done a marathon before and that you've done these other things and that you're interested in doing it? Like, if you really think about it, he's sitting here bringing the room, and maybe I'm just making up a judgment. But if I'm a doctor, I'd be like, wow, you plan to do a marathon. Wow, have you done marathons before? Wow, well, any amount of movement that you might do in that training, that movement's beneficial. I really encourage you, and if you need anything from me to support any new movement, let me know. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you said it, but how much do you really think as a new patient, and when you're there, a higher weight guy, what are the chances that he actually even believes you?
no, absolutely. I mean, and here's the thing. I started this episode by saying I would in there being able to share what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain point, whether it's with this doctor or another one, again, we have to weed through what it is. I mean, all these biases exist. I hear what you're saying. You're absolutely right. For our listeners out there, where if any mention of weight is going to be triggering or harmful, then obviously with this experience, it's next. With me, I'm still, and I'm glad that you brought this to light. Because I mean, I can only, to a certain extent, control how I'm communicating with the people around me, and how they take that in is really on them. But what's interesting, Rebecca?
Mm-hmm.
We've worked so much on being able to communicate our wants
Mm-hmm.
and what we deserve.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm realizing in this conversation is that I need some work on interpreting some of the responses, right? Because and that's a good thing. And I think that it's been a while since I've had kind of one of these realizations and breakthroughs.
But you get what I'm saying? Like, you're like, hey, like I plan to train for a marathon. I've done it before, blah, blah, blah. And he comes back with, oh, well, let's check the labs and see how things are going. I have a lot of people who are just unwilling to admit that their weight is a problem. Do you see what I'm saying? You're literally saying, I plan to train for a marathon, which nobody has to ever do a marathon. And this is news to me. I'm excited to hear about those plans in a future episode. I think that's great. And I also think you're great if you don't do a marathon. I think if you, like I went on a run and my knee hurt and, I was just like, oh, this is interesting. I think I need to rest it. And, knees can hurt at any size. So it's just this thing. The most important thing is that you're getting the good care that you need. But, remember for the healthcare providers and things like that are listening, it's like, I think the idea is providers need to do a lot more work to use words like weight concerns, to ask for permission to talk about weight in the context where it might be helpful or not helpful. Ask about trauma history. Like, is there anything in your history around weight or dieting or an eating disorder or anything like that I need to know about that maybe it's not a good idea for us to discuss weight? And, I can get a weight, but you could turn around. Like, there's so many things that the doctors can say. And I'm not even saying it's bad to go to a doctor and get weighed. I mean, if you go to a doctor once a year and you want to have a once a year data point, I think that's amazing. It's your data, it's your information. The point is you have body autonomy. Things are your health information. And asking for body respect and asking for doctors to do better, it was like he was on the defensive in these hypothetical things, because he didn't want to be controlled about when he would bring up weight as a concern. At least he would say, I hear what you're saying. How about this? If you ever come in here medically and there's something where I see that weight could be a contributing factor, my plan is I'll ask about your behaviors. I'll look at lots of other things. And I would like to ask permission of if we can talk about weight in the context of what we're discussing, right?
I mean, yeah, that would be great. And for all our listeners out there, especially our ones living in larger bodies, like this is something that we experience more often than not. Mm-hmm. Like the hypothetical doctor that you're describing, Rebecca, just please let me know what medical school they went to and where they're practicing, because even if they are in a faraway land, I'm going to fly to go see them. Right. For me, the win here was being able to share where I was coming from in a more confident way. Mm-hmm. Now, based on this awesome conversation here, I need to really think about whether or not I'm going to continue seeing this doctor. I'm definitely going to do some follow-ups with him, just kind of monitor him as well.
Yeah.
And then just see what's next. And I shared in the last podcast about this subject that much like a trainer or a therapist or even at your favorite restaurant, if you're not digging what you're being served, then, mm-hmm. It's okay to move on. Mm-hmm. Again, this was neither planned for him or for me, but it's something that happened. And I think that, unfortunately, this is something that happens more times than not. Mm-hmm. And the crazy part about it is this has been an evolution for me to even be able to get to the point where I feel confident enough in knowing what I want and who I am to express it. Mm-hmm. But just like anything in life, people are going to potentially get defensive or just choose to not believe or not step out of their comfort zone or try to evolve as a professional mm-hmm. if they feel like they don't want to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for our listeners, we're up against a being in these bigger bodies and having these biases being placed on us. And, all I can say is, it's good to be able to speak up for yourself. And then from there, let's figure out what that means.
Yeah. Well, before we get into your labs, I want to say one more thing.
I did send you those, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yes.
We're going to talk labs. So I went on a walk and talk with a client the other day, and this client's a nurse, and we're walking and she's like, we're talking about, she got some family pictures back and she felt very jarred by it. Like, is this what I look like? And so, quickly the short version of the story is we processed that. And she deals with anxiety. And so she started to have this worry about if I include this in the holiday cards or New Year's cards, whatever, right? What will people think? And I asked her to imagine what she thought the worst thing, who would she send these cards to and the worst thing she thought someone would say. And she picked her grandma and something like, oh, she must be miserable grandmas. Or something like that. I know. And that's what I said. I was like, well, can we kind of think of some like this generous empathy of like, hey, like, it's grandma, who knows how much longer she has left. And she says and thinks what, you know what I mean? Like just kind of like, just to
Yes.
soften this blow of that anxiety. But then I asked her, I was like, you know, what if fat was the ideal, like what if that was what was desirable? And she's like, oh, I'd have no problem. I think I look amazing. And I was like, actually, exactly. And I was like, and what we need to know is that looking at that picture and that jarred feeling and that feeling like you don't see yourself, like that is a social construct, right? We have been told that that is the bad thing. And the whole reason why you worry about sending out these cards has to do with a societal expectation. And she herself has a complicated history of being low weight, misdiagnosed ADHD and on Ritalin when she was a kid. And so her weight went even lower and then her weight went higher and there was an eating disorder history. So it's just complicated. And we're talking it through this context of this photo and like what she wants for herself, for the next decade and beyond. And she's like, you know what, Rebecca, I saved a man's life yesterday. And I was like, what? And she tells me that she was visiting him and she saw these early stroke signs and she called people and sure enough, got the right medical care and she helped to get the treatment to prevent his stroke, had all these vitals. And the doctors just accoladed her left and right, And she's like, I know I'm a good human being. And she's like, I have the potential to save people's lives. And she's like, so I want to walk around in a world that sees me as a good human being, right? So we're really starting to pivot like,
oh, that's awesome.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Great. No, absolutely. So there were two things that I really loved, and I know that, hope I'm not jumping in too early,
no,
but
that's fine.
how beautiful is that? That she was able to save someone's life. What a tremendously amazing thing.
Yeah.
And two, I really loved what you said about like, what if that was socially what was desirable? Would you still consider yourself? How would you see yourself? And for her to be able to be like, yeah, I'm a hot potatoes.
Yeah.
That's a really fun way to kind of switch it around and look at that.
Yeah, and how this relates to this conversation, it has to do with her being a nurse and working in a hospital because guess where his BMI range was?
I'm thinking it's probably lower.
Yeah. Right? In that quote, normal range, which actually, according to the BMI, it's the overweight BMI that has the most longevity. And so my point is, and again, this is just one example and one story, right? But you're walking into a doctor's office trying to do the right thing, trying to explain your history so he has a full picture, trying to protect yourself, right? And he was receptive. I believe that he was receptive to your boundaries, but it was yes, but. He was like, yes, but.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you see what I'm saying? And so he's doing his work, but he's not there yet. And I do appreciate that he's like, hey, rather than take this further, let's talk about labs. And hopefully, I'm not trying to get you to see another doctor because I want you to get the care you need. But it's like just pointing out these opportunities that a lot of doctors probably don't see.
Listen, I appreciate you pointing them out. And one thing that I've realized living in my body for as long as I have is even someone who is yes butting me is so much more progress than I've ever had in the past.
Right.
Now, what I choose to do with that is up to me, and I have that power now, and I recognize that, and I have the options to move on. But I also do see it, and maybe this could be the educator in me, but is as an opportunity to hopefully grow with this doctor and see if he's willing to change. But I am old enough to know that if it doesn't happen sooner than later, it's not going to happen. So I don't really waste my time anymore like I might have in the past, or I'm not going to take too much shit.
Right.
But at the same time, a yes, but is better than this is dumb. You're not a doctor.
Yeah.
Like, don't tell me.
Let me know when you go in again because I can prep you. I can give, I guess we should include in the show notes some of these things, but there's a JAMA article about when someone's going in for an earache and it's like the person's pointing at their ear and the doctor's pointing at the BMI chart. And so there's, and there's some good resources. Reagan Chastain at Dances with Fat has these good index cards. Louise Metz has a private practice in medicine and her practices all health at every size, weight inclusive. So I'll cobble together some good examples that anyone could use, but definitely let me know when you go back again and we can maybe kind of prep some boundaries or ways you might share information and asking him to do his work and everything like that. But I do think that it is interesting societally, like when we talk about weight in the medical field, like we'll talk about like an obesity paradox, right? Like, why is it a paradox? And then also you'll hear a lot of conversation, and this is kind of where I think the doctor is going, is it's like, oh, so their labs look great until, right? And so they'll talk about what's only a matter of time, right? The labs look great until there's some sort of, see, I told you so. Like, and now you have this lab. Like, first of all, as we age is when things could tend to decline, right? So when I reviewed your labs before, they were all totally normal, like, and you were not in a good emotional state. You were having panic attacks. You were having anxiety. So emotionally, your mental well-being was way off. And we've done all this work on body kindness through all these years. And I know we've talked about there are some things, as being adapted to in your time is getting, stuck, and you're launching a business, and like that you want my help in healthy self-care, again, and we'll work on that. Like, I am your friend. I care about you. I will always be there for you, but I want to be there for you at any size and no matter what your labs are, because we should be neutral. We should be kind to your body and neutral about the weight. It is one number, and and even in looking at the labs, let's look at labs over time. But if one day something goes off with the lab, it might not even be explainable by your weight. It might be explainable by genetics and also aging. And a thin person would likely get that benefit, right? Remember Bob Harper and his heart attack, right? He could say he has a family history, right? Because he's thin and he's fit. But because you don't fit the mold of the picture of societal health, you don't get that same privilege and kindness. And that's what makes it weight bias. That's what makes the encounter oppressive. And that's what doctors should work to heal. Now, should we talk about your labs real quick?
Yeah, let's do it.
So from your end, you email me some labs. What do you know about these labs?
I know that no one called me. So right away, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm not dying yet.
Okay.
But other than that, I think you make a really good point in just even asking that question, whether or not you think that you were trying to make a point, is that even after all these years and trying to be as in touch with my body as possible, I still can't read a damn lab to save my life. Like, I have no clue what it is. And I do.
It's funny. Your labs even have like green and yellow. They're making it as easy as possible.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. So I sent them, and you know what? This is new, right? Because it's a new app that helps you interpret them.
Yep.
So what I saw was, okay, stuff's in the greenish, but where in the green it falls, I have no clue how to interpret that. But I'm like, okay, there's no red. Right. So again, it's still this really unfortunate inability to make sense of what I was sent.
And so we need to understand that genetics is the predominant factor. So what do you have family history of that you have concerns about? I think we talked about before, but I think maybe diabetes.
High blood pressure,
okay, high blood pressure, diabetes.
Those are the biggies.
Okay, so any heart disease or just high cholesterol.
All the good stuff.
Okay, so what we need to understand is that with that family history, that alone is a sign of that your risk is increased compared to somebody else who doesn't have the family history, right? Just because of genetic factors.
Yeah.
So the first thing is a lipid panel, and it separates all the different values out. But I want to go to your total cholesterol. So your total cholesterol is 144, and the standard range is anything less than 200, okay? Your HDL, this is good cholesterol. The standard range is anything over 40. Yours is 44. What that means is that you have a good value for a good cholesterol, meaning that type of cholesterol is beneficial for your heart, okay? Then there's something called a cholesterol HDL ratio. This is like, okay, given the total cholesterol and the benefit of the good HDL cholesterol, is this ratio a good ratio, meaning that we can be happy, like our heart is in a good place. So anything less than 5 in this ratio is what the standard range is. Yours is a 3.3. So you're basically getting an A as far as your heart health goes. You are literally getting an A. I have to tell you, I know someone who I care about very deeply, who is thin, who has a family history of high cholesterol, okay, who is now officially on lifetime Lipitor, just like his mother and father. Guess who it is?
Mm. And is it your significant other?
Yeah, Andy.
Uh,
So let that sink in. Andy's your friend.
yeah.
He's a thin dude, isn't he?
Yeah.
His parents are thin people. His mom's a dietitian, retired, right?
Yes.
His dad works on a farm. He puts out hay. They have chickens and horses, and he shoes them, and they have dogs. They go on big hikes, and they are, they're getting up there, 70s, right? But they have been on Lipitor since their mid-40s. His cholesterol is 400.
Oh, boy.
I mean, and I'm laughing at that, right? Do you see what I'm saying? I honestly want to know, how do you feel about that? How do you feel?
Well, that's just it, right? I mean, I think that we are so beat down by the bias that exists that these victories that would be viewed as victories by someone in a smaller body don't feel the same for us. Mm-hmm. And that's really unfortunate. So that's how I feel right now. I mean, and we talked about this in the last podcast, and it's kind of sad, but also eye-opening to see that I'm not able to celebrate the fact that I'm healthy from a numbers perspective in a way that I should be able to celebrate, or at least acknowledge and nod and say, good.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Bernie, by all medical standards and for how we look at labs and use labs, my husband has a significant higher risk of having a heart issue now or in the future than you do.
Yeah.
So let that sink in.
Yeah. No, I mean, and again, oh gosh, now I'm really concerned for Andy.
Well, no, it's not that. He's on Lipitor, and it is, and he, he has a somewhat active job, and he does want to be active, and it's unreasonably. He also has diabetes in his family history, and he's still pretty young, so we're watching that. But it's like, but the point of it is that we're humans, and humans don't live forever. And we get health problems, and we need and deserve good care. And it's good to go to the doctor, and it's good to watch things, but we're not biohackers who are going to prevent anything from happening, right?
No, it's so interesting that you say that though. Okay. So as an educator, right? Like, far too often as a teacher, the calls that you make are the ones to kind of share some of the doom and gloom. Like, oh, little Billy isn't doing well. He threw a pencil at so-and-so's head. And, but we don't as often. And I tried to make it a point towards the end of my time in a classroom to also call about the good and really celebrate that. This is something as a doctor, and I know your time is limited, and I know that your schedules are packed, and I know you have responsibilities that you're splitting between office time and hospital. But man, even trying to reach out one time a day or a week to share some good news with somebody, especially, that would go a long way. Because you're right. For me, I'm like, maybe one of the, contributing things as to why I'm not really celebrating or acknowledging my good health is because when you're okay, you don't get the calls. It's more like, oh, okay, well, you're fine. And actually it's just sent to you in a piece of paper. Like, a nurse didn't even call me this time. It was just paperwork. No, absolutely. And at least in the past, hey, Bernie, your labs came back great. Like, that's the normal call that I'm used to.
And I think a really good Hayes informed doctor would be celebrating your labs and would, even in a medical note, I am so excited about these labs, things that might concern a doctor around weight and with your history around cholesterol. Things are looking great. We haven't even got to the glucose, but we'll do that in a second, right? But it takes 2 seconds to write a 3-sentence celebratory, and I'm on your side. Eat well, sleep well, move your body. I'll see you in a year. It takes 3 seconds.
Like you're literally describing like my doctor, Miss Steamy, or McDreamy or whatever. Let me know when you find that doctor.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. All right. So real quick. So diabetes, right? So you have diabetes in your family history. I have diabetes in my family history. I do a lot of professional work around diabetes, specifically self-care for diabetes, because it is a landmine in the medical field, right? And there are a lot of myths. People think that them eating sugar causes diabetes, or that their weight caused their diabetes. And in the first line of recommendation when somebody gets diabetes is to lose weight. So there's bias riddled throughout. In 2020, I am going to be focusing some of my medical nutrition speaking and, in professional work. I'm going to be providing space for weight-inclusive diabetes care, as well as diabetes care with people with an eating disorder history, because it's such an unmet need, and so this is something that a lot of higher weight people get warnings of, pre-diabetes. And it's like, okay, based on what, and this is in your history. So it's right to monitor and be concerned about. So the first step is when they do your labs, is that you're fasting, and it's a fasting blood glucose test. And so this is an immediate measure, right? So it's not over time, and it's immediate measure of right now, right? Based on your fasting state, how much glucose or sugar, which sugar is your brain eats the glucose, it's makes your muscles move. So this is beneficial, but it can build up too high, and that can be a signal of diabetes risk. So what this is measuring, this is the baseline test that's measuring based on fasting what your current blood glucose is. The reference range is 70 to 99, okay? And anywhere in that reference range means you're good. So you're good if you're at 70, you're good if you're at 99. And honestly, even if you're like 100, 101, no doctor is going to be like, or at least shouldn't, because you're just outside of this reference range, Guess what yours is?
I didn't even look, to be honest.
Well, it's 80.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. So basically, you are squarely in this range. There is no need, based on this range, to do a hemoglobin A1C test, which would be the next step, which is another blood test that looks at a 3-month picture of your blood sugars. Based on this, at any size, if we didn't know the person's size and based on this, the response would be like, great, their blood sugars are great. So that means you might want to look at your eating patterns just because your own interest or curiosity. But it's like, if you're not constipated, if you eat when you're hungry, you enjoy foods, that there's some basic knowing of nutrition. But with respect to your eating patterns and, your body's ability to handle what you're eating and use and process what you're eating with respect to carbohydrate intake and how your body utilizes it, and what your labs are saying about your glucose, it is healthy and good. And you don't have any reason to be worried about that.
Oh, good. Great. Yeah. I mean, again, that's all exciting news. And I say that, just trying to take some of it in, because again, I know that there's our listeners out there, and we're constantly unable to acknowledge some of these victories based on the stigmas that are placed.
Mm-hmm. Real quick question, because there's a lab on here that I don't always see. Did you talk about thyroid, or do you have a history of a low thyroid, or did you ask about it? Did you talk about it? Or did
No,
okay.
I just talked about feeling low energy. I did share that. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's where that came from.
That might have been. I think it's more the lack of sleep. Anyway, your thyroid function is totally normal too. But yeah, I was just curious if,
if he put it in there, or if I did. No, I'd shared with him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's funny, right? Because Becca, the last time we got in contact where the podcast really kicked off was, around Bennett's birth. And now we have another one. And, life can be complicated in wonderful ways and lead to very tiresome days. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it was the kid and nothing else.
Yeah.
So good, it's good. It's my little guy that's beating me up, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, so thank you so much for sharing and for sharing your labs. I do want to let listeners know that go and see the doctor. And even if you have labs that are off, labs are information. So, I don't want anyone to feel any amount of shame if you're listening and it's like, well, that's good news for Bernie, but my labs are off. The thing that I would want you to take is that lots of people's labs are off for lots of reasons. And I am always of the mindset, more body kindness, hooray. But let's not make it about punishing. Let's not make it about weight loss. Let's make it about, is there a positive reason or motivation for me to know more about my health and my habits and try to align them from a place of self-care and kindness instead of judgment or shame?
No, I think that's so right on. And for me, Rebecca, again, to our listeners, yeah, I mean, I'm able to see these labs and they fall within the good range. But from year to year, I just want to be as informed as possible, and that's what I'm choosing to do moving forward. So again, no matter what I encounter, that information that I feel is good for me to know, and then decide how I'm going to move forward and interpret that interpretation of, interpret the information. But yeah, next year, guys, I will be sharing with you again. And right. We're going to keep monitoring this because it's something that's important to me. And I hope that you find value in it too.
Yeah. And Bernie, I really want you to try to practice a lot of self-compassion and positive self-care, because what I can imagine is going to happen is being tired, being busy. You might have a goal to get some workouts in and they're not going to happen, and you might beat yourself up about it. Instead, it's much better to say, you know what? I really wanted to get some movement in that I didn't get in, and that's okay. Maybe there's something I can do between our schedules, or I can try to find a way to reframe it. I want to remember that I am good and worthy, and right now my labs are medically good. So,
yeah, I appreciate
that
direction.
Because,
this is for a lot of parents and people who are providing care for loved ones or even elderly pets. And I say that because I had an elderly pet. Yeah, you can really just feel beat up. But you're right. I mean, I appreciate you reminding me about thinking that way, because in these sleep deprived days, sometimes you can tend to let a lot of that negative self-talk creep in, and that's not the case. I mean, we're literally caring for another being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. We all need more compassion, and we really need, and I know we're something that we're going to be working on in our themes and our conversations next year, to really home in on that self-compassion and kindness and that redirecting ourselves, because it is, if you're at a place, we've had those listener questions, right? Oh, I really should be exercising more, but I hate it. It's like, and maybe that's where you need to be right now, but maybe you'll find something that you do want to do. And how do you gently guide yourself to these things? And obviously with you, like I said, we'll talk about it in a future show, but having a marathon goal, that is a big goal. So I'm curious about all those things feeding into it, and how I might be able to help you practice good, positive self-care.
Great. Yes, I'll take it. And I'd love to share that with our listeners, but another time.
And that's our show. The podcast is made possible with support from listeners. Please donate to help offset production costs at gofundme.com/bodykindness. And please rate and review the show when you have a moment. It really matters. Let's keep the conversations going on Facebook. Search Body Kindness and request to join the group for Body Kindness readers and listeners. Have a question for us to answer on a future episode? Visit bodykindnessbook.com/question. Body Kindness books and audiobooks are available wherever books are sold. To request a signed print copy, visit bodykindnessbook.com/order. For other questions about this podcast, please email info@bodykindnessbook.com.